Coming back to the lore of the Dead Space series, I thought it may be a fun idea to make a video to explore the individual stages of a Necromorph Outbreak or Marker Uprising. If I sound a bit off, more than usual, it's because I have recently caught my annual head cold and am currently feeling a bit sluggish, or maybe I am slowly but surely becoming a necromorph with all the content I've been working on for you to enjoy, but who knows. So without further ado, let's get into the stages of a Necromorph Outbreak and all of the lore surrounding those periods. So with the first stage happening prior to the initial outbreak of necromorphs, let's go through the mental stage, or as I like to call it, the psychological warfare stage. When a marker is activated, it will send out a series of pulses that will ripple outward towards the surrounding areas. How far the surrounding areas may be can span from the size of a town to a city, depending on which marker we focus on, as the marker from Aegis 7, marker 3A, had an area of effect that covered the entire colony, which would have been the same size of a town, with each sector surrounding the whole left behind by the planet crack, or the one from Titan Station being able to stretch outwards towards the sprawl, while being inside of the government sector. Anyway, getting back on topic, the marker's signal that it sends out resonates with our brains, with sound frequencies reaching through to alpha, delta and theta brainwaves within the electromagnetic spectrum. From here, the marker will implant the codes necessary to build more obelisks of terror in the future. However, this knowledge would serve only the ones with the necessary intelligence levels, as those that are below those thresholds will only hear white noise and will not be able to comprehend the visions within their dreams, chalking them up to nightmares, which will lead into cases of insomnia that would begin to grow as the days and weeks go by. The insomnia would lead people into only having a couple hours of sleep every night, then with them having to complete a full day's work the next day. In the short time, having very limited sleep can be very dangerous, as it can be like being drunk. However, the long term can be seriously dangerous, as it can lead into hallucinations, into suicide, a decline in mental health, among other things. The most common case to follow the insomnia would be a Great Depression that would make people less motivated to complete tasks or do them as effectively, which can lead into accidents or mistakes. You could also call this the decline of society, as this stage preys on the very thing that makes our society work so well, and that's the people that work within it to make ends meet. The people who can understand the code would begin to hear whispers, as if the marker was speaking to them directly, and they would start dreaming of the symbols as well, along with seeing them as hallucinations given off by the marker's influence. As the marker does give out visions and hallucinations of its own as well, these would be known as apparitions, for example, Damara and Nicole. The main objective for this stage is to delude the population, to weaken and divide the society, but to also set up the future of the markers, as the Brethren Moons cannot create new markers, therefore they use other species to replicate the monoliths for themselves. The next stage would happen when the intelligent ones would inspect the marker, but the symbols would be of their own key interest as per the marker's design, where mostly the scientists would examine them, using them to build a code of DNA, where the code would be brought into action with the people creating an organism with their experiments, which would lay dormant until it can get into close proximity to dead cells, flesh, or perhaps an entire body. From there, the organism would feed off the flesh or cells, absorbing the nutrients to grow its biomass. From there, it would construct what it would not use to create a new form for a deadly new purpose, which it would make that known to the neighbors upon the sheer sight of them, supplying more and more corpses for the necromorph horde. However, before we move on to the next stage, there is something important to note here, as in some cases it is entirely possible for necromorphs to arise before the corruption does, with it creating its own presence. However, in the case of the outbreaks on Aegis 7, Earth, Titan Station, and the USG Ishimura, the corruption had been discovered to be growing before the necromorphs had been stumbled upon, or even had begun. The corruption's main purpose would be environmental terraforming for supportive scenarios, as the floors can become difficult to traverse over. Corridors and the ventilation system would also be blocked off, making progression very close to impossible, as the corruption would grow faster than it can be cut down. In some cases, corruption or recombinated growths have been sighted near to a marker, like the black marker found on Earth, which may have just been dormant, necrotized flesh stuck to the marker as to speed things up. This would be the main stage for an outbreak, for obvious reasons. You know, not because I couldn't think of a better name for it. Moving on, the necromorphs would continue to attack, kill, assimilate, rinsing and repeating until the desired death and rebirth toll had been acquired. The amount of time that this would take place over would be very different, as the next stage can happen within days of an outbreak as seen in Dead Space 2, or over generations as seen in Dead Space 3, depending on what the resistances would be like. In this stage, the marker will also give out a large electromagnetic pulse that would leave the occupants that much further divided. As, let's think for a second, the human race right now uses text communication more than verbal communication in our world at this point in time. Our dependency on technology would leave us at odds. If it were suddenly taken away or destroyed, it would leave us to fend for ourselves, which would only help the necromorphs to continue their onslaught. As the outbreak progresses, so too does the corruption, continuing to reconstruct the environment in the necromorphs' twisted and distorted image. However, as the death toll comes up to the desired amount, the marker would then issue out a new directive to return to base, bringing all necromorphs to the marker, which will lead into the next and final stage of the outbreak. The necromorphs would gather around the monolith until all are in close proximity. The marker would then begin to levitate into the air, pulling the necromorphs into the sky, in which the marker uses its gravitational abilities to pull them up, along with tearing structures apart to release the trapped corruption within the corridors, with all the flesh, all of the bodies coming towards the marker, becoming one with its will. They would all soon be made whole, and they would soon form a brethren moon, with the marker in question at its center of the raw, unimaginable power. The amount of time this takes is uncertain, as we haven't been treated to a sighting of a brethren moon being fully formed, so it is difficult to say, but I would imagine under 12 hours as an estimate, but maybe you watching this video have a better guess, so let me know. One thing is for certain though, and that is what the Brethren Moon does, as an outbreak has concluded. and that's using one of its many tendrils to grab hold of the other markers floating nearby, and it would throw them into the dark, endless voids of space to seek out new rich worlds teeming with life, whether primitive or highly intelligent. There are some out there that believe that the moons created the marker, which is actually false, as there is no law to promote that idea, and it makes more sense that they use the ignorance of other species to their advantage, so they may not have to. Otherwise, they would not need to implant the mental blueprint in the first place, which does have the ability to grant the occupant to destroy the markers, which can shut an outbreak down within the mist, which is a very big disadvantage for the moons. So you have to kind of think, why would they bestow a mental blueprint if they did not need to bestow a mental blueprint? As far as we know, a necromorph outbreak can be defeated, while being an unlikely outcome with all the obstacles in one's way. However, the way to defeat an outbreak, or more likely to delay an outbreak, is to sever the link between the conduit of the Brethren Moons to the necromorphs, that being the marker. If the marker were to be placed in an area where the electromagnetic signal cannot penetrate the walls or travel through seamlessly, then the outbreak can be disrupted that way. However, the only places that seem to have that effect would be under the Gulf of Mexico, which had stopped the outbreak on Earth when Michael Altman had successfully sent the marker back to its resting place after destroying the research facility. Another way of disrupting the outbreak would be to shatter the marker. However, a great amount of force would be needed to do so, as in the events of Aegis 7, it took an entire continent falling from orbit to destroy the marker, leaving only a few shards of its husk remaining. However, caution would be needed here, as those shards are just as capable as the entire marker is, as they all share in its properties. So destroying the individual shards would also cease an outbreak, as they too are just as capable of reconstructing DNA, creating another outbreak, as per the rewrite of the conception of the second installment of the game series. Perhaps in the future I will make a video exploring the rewrite of the marker lore, as within the events of Dead Space Aftermath, Strauss does provide lines of dialogue that suggests the writing staff rewrote the lore as to make the marker more of an antagonist rather than a obelisk that has ties to the necromorphs and acts more like a guardian for humanity. Or maybe another theory video that looks into the original conception of the marker lore and their stories. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the insight. If you did, then please hit the like button, comment your thoughts below and discuss more about the lore below, and I look forward to hearing from you. Sign up to join the British Alliance today by subscribing to the channel and bringing in the notification bell, allowing all updates for more great content, and I will see all of you among the cosmos, and be sure to have a good one.